Devo dire all'inizio mi dispiace di non parlare in italiano, ero studente all'Università di Bologna 19-20 anni fa, ma ho dimenticato troppo in questi 20 anni e se sbaglio non voglio fare uno scandalo per il nostro grande ambasciatore, quindi parlo in inglese, ma... Allora... It's been very fun for me to be here in Venice amidst such inspirational Italian entrepreneurs. And I was spending, I had a long conversation last night with 3 or 4 of these Italian entrepreneurs, and I said, tell me what you think would be most helpful in terms of remarks to share. And what they told me was, they said, pick 2 or 3 things and don't be a diplomat. They said, give your hardest, bluntest advice about what we can do to nourish a more entrepreneurial ecosystem in Italy. And so I'm going to do that and do it very briefly. Innovation is at the core of the Italian character. If you think back to the Renaissance, we are in the heart of the Italian Renaissance, and the Renaissance was nothing more than a series of breakthrough innovations and thinking new about the world around us, and then forever changing it. Innovation more recently has sprouted from the shores of Italy in creations from everything as varied as banks, to the barometer, to batteries, to eyeglasses, to the typewriter, and more. All of these innovations, all of these inventions come from Italy. But there is a gap between innovation and commercialization. There's a gap between research, discovery, and entrepreneurship. And I would just offer my thoughts that there are sort of 3 things to think about in terms of helping to create a more entrepreneurial ecosystem, not specific to Italy, but in general, in Europe, more, very, very broadly. The first has to do, and I'm speaking sort of as a member of the family here. I'm in government. And so the first thing that I would say is we need actually much less involvement of government and lawyers in the work of entrepreneurship. I'm struck by how easy it is in Indonesia, in Brazil, in Silicon Valley, and in so many other places for a 22-year-old to start a business based on some computer code. They don't have to hire a lawyer. They don't have to have a friend in a government office to be able to put the right stamps of accreditation on a piece of paper. So the first thing I would say is that government regulation in the ICT field, broadly, worldwide, I think is something that if you reduce it, the amount of innovation and the amount of entrepreneurship will go up. I don't think that government officials like myself in suits and a tie should be telling 25-year-olds what they can and cannot do from an entrepreneurship standpoint. And further, I think that these entrepreneurs should not have to hire a lawyer for a long time. So if we can make the legal system something that is a less prominent part of the life of an early entrepreneur, I think that we will see the entrepreneurial ecosystem grow. That's the first thing. The second thing has to do with early stage capital. ICT, information communications technology, and represented by many, if not all, of the companies on the screen here, all benefited from very risky investment capital. There is a culture in much of the world where new companies go from being very small to very big very quickly. That it's relatively easy. There's a marketplace that lends itself to getting risk capital. And the economics of risk capital, for those of you who are entrepreneurs, know you don't have to necessarily have an implicit guarantee of return. Rather, if you are a venture capitalist at a firm like Greylock or Sequoia Capital or Kleiner Perkins or any of the firms that have unleashed innovation and created the industries of the future, you know, looking down here at Google, they had venture capital from Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins. You know, looking to my left, they had venture capital from Greylock. When these venture capital firms invested in these very, very young people, I know Mark Zuckerberg and I know Sergey Brin and Larry Page, and these were young guys. They were in their early and mid-20s when they raised money from these venture capitalists. The venture capitalists thought that, if I had to guess, I bet they would have said they would have maybe had a 10% or a 20% chance of getting their money back. But because there's an ecosystem of people with lots of money that they are ready and willing to invest in young people, like a Mark Zuckerberg or a Larry Page or a Sergey Brin, the industries of the future are created. And then my third and last point is somewhat related, and that goes to the issue of risk. In an environment that fears risk is one that is not going to have entrepreneurship, and it's not going to have much in the way of innovation. I don't think that risk has a very negative connotation in business circles, and I think that we need to take some of that negative connotation away from it. In, I think, too many societies, if you start a business or if you launch a product and it fails, you're fired and you've disgraced your family and it's hard to get another job. I would argue that in the United States, many of our greatest executives are great executives because they have had spectacular failures and they've learned from them. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. And he started a company called, I think it was called Next or something. How many of you own Next computers? Yeah. He is the executive he is today at Apple, and there is an iPhone and there is an iPad, in part because he learned from his failures. Have you heard of Zynga? Zynga is the new sensation in Silicon Valley, and it has a market value that some people calculate to be $10 billion. And it was started by a guy named Mark Pincus. Mark Pincus, before starting Zynga, started a social network that competed against called Facebook, called Tribe.net. I guarantee you none of you are members of Tribe.net. But because there was a venture capital community that didn't destroy him for his failure with Tribe.net, he was able to create a $10 billion enterprise. You know, looking down the panel here again and thinking about Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google. The company that Eric was a CEO of prior to Google was Novell. I don't think many of you are probably using Novell productivity systems on your computers right now. So my point here is that we cannot punish failure, and we cannot fear risk. There's a statement that I'll close with by one of America's past presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, where he talks about this issue of risk, and I think that it can be applied into the world of entrepreneurship. And he counseled us all to stay out of what he called the gray twilight, il grigio crepuscolo. And what he said is, it's far better to dare mighty deeds, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much because they live in the gray twilight, the grigio crepuscolo, that knows not victory nor defeat. And so for there to be a strong future, for there to be an economic future in Italy that's stronger than Italy's economic past, it has to understand and embrace and accept the kind of risk that's inherent in entrepreneurship for it to then enjoy the rewards. Thank you.